Hello everyone, Stove here, and on today's edition of Know Your Enemy, we'll be talking about the Gladius. Now, when people start looking at what fighter to buy, one ship always comes up, and that is the Gladius. The Gladius comes in two variants, one with a skin and a different loadout, which is called the Gladius Valiant, and the other just being the regular Gladius. The Gladius is considered a light fighter that retails for $90 US in the RSI shop, and it is still currently available for purchase. But how does it fare against other fighters in its class? And what can people expect to see when they fight against it? I'll help answer some of those questions and more as we look deeper to what the Gladius has to offer in Star Citizen. The first thing you will notice is the Gladius's menacing futuristic design. In today's world, the Gladius would be state-of-the-art. In Star Citizen, it's a much older ship that is tried and true. The Gladius's frame design is very small, coming in at only 20 meters in length. To compare, a Saber sits at 24 meters and an Avenger at 22 meters. The Arrow, the ship that the Gladius is often paired against when deciding to buy an entry-level fighter, comes in at a very low 16 meters in length to compare. To put that into perspective, the M50 Interceptor, one of the smallest fighters in the game, is only 11 meters in length. The Gladius also has a very thin cross-section that, combined with its 20-meter length, can make it very difficult to hit with certain weapons, even when aiming inside the aiming reticle. In terms of weak points, the Gladius has a few. First, as with most pure fighters, there is no bed. The wings will also break off at the tips, taking the missile pod on the end of said wing with it. The guns, however, will mostly stay intact. Having your guns protected in Star Citizen is an important advantage, one even the Arrow lacks. The other weak point is of course power, which we'll get into a little bit later. The weapon spread itself on the Gladius is great because of the center nose mount and where the guns are mounted on each wing. This makes 3 shots come out in a triangle pattern that makes it very difficult to miss even the smallest targets with at least one of the guns, if aiming inside the reticle. In terms of the armament itself, the Gladius comes stock with 3 size 3 hardpoints. When talking about DPS or burst DPS, people often don't think of ships like the Gladius performing well because of ships like the Saber and the Scythe around. However, with 3 size 3 hardpoints, you are only 1 less than the Saber, which really isn't bad at all. That's 3/4 of the DPS for almost half the price of a Saber. For this reason, the Gladius is a very capable ship, dealing good damage and taking on the best fighters in the game. For missiles, the ship comes well armed with 2 size 3 and 4 size 2 missiles that you can mix match or double up on, giving you many options and a lot of missiles to work with. We will get into more of that later when we take a look at the stats and modules of the Gladius on hardpoint, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, here we are looking at the Aegis Gladius in hardpoint. The first thing you'll notice is that it is very low on power, already exceeding power. We're only 95% efficient with this gun setup right here. We're going to change that though. Guys, if you run this gun setup on the Gladius, it's very underwhelming. I don't run 2 separate guns on any ship. I prefer to monogun, as people call it, for aiming reasons and overall DPS reasons. A lot of people really like this Mantis GT220 on the front, kind of because it reminds people of like the A10 Gatling gun and all that stuff. Again, very underwhelming. I wouldn't use this in the current state. So we're going to go ahead and change these real quick to my preferred loadout, which is Omni Skies, of course. Now you can put M4As on there or Coral lasers if you have them. Any laser autocannon will do here. I just have these in stock because of the Freelancer monthly ship that the subscribers have access to. So these are really easy to get right now. And I would recommend putting laser cannons on these guys, so they are the best in meta right now, just in case you didn't know this. If you're flying with anything else, save maybe Pyro Burst, shotguns, you're really not doing or inflicting a lot of damage. These will inflict 551 damage each per hit, so you're doing a lot of alpha damage here per hit. You're also getting a lot of sustained DPS here, and of course, just that quick change brought us up to 100% efficiency. Now, when you get hit, that's not going to be the case because, of course, we need to recharge the shields, right? So now we're getting hit. We're only 30 or 74% efficient. Okay, that's still pretty good for a small ship with only 1 power supply. That actually sits right around where a Saber would sit with its shield recharging, or a Saber Raven with 2 power supplies. So overall, with shields recharging, you're not bad. However, I do find that if you're pushing this ship to the limits, especially with Suppress IR on, you will just turn off. The ship will cut off in the middle of battle, guys. It's happened to me maybe twice before I learned what exactly was happening. I wasn't getting hit by distortion cannons or anything like that, or an EMP. It just flat out shut off, and I was wondering why, and that was just because I was using too much power. Okay, so it will just flat out shut off sometimes, and that is one of the defects of this ship. We only have one power supply, but hey, it's still a good ship, especially when you learn how to fly it. And I only had that happen in intense fights where I didn't turn suppress IR off, which probably would have helped and managed my power a little bit. And also, all my shield panels were down, regenning, so it was really pushing my power. My weapons were overheating, things like that. So it was in dire straits, these battles where the ship did cut off. However, it will cut off. So just know that that does happen, okay? To rectify this, I found that you can simply change the shields. You'll get more out of this than anything, even changing the power supply here, because you do have two shields here. Changing these to something like a Targa is going to lessen the power strain on your ship, and that's going to bump you up to 93% efficiency with shields recharging. Okay, now you can bump this up to an ACOM Starheart. That's going to give you way more cooling, way more efficiency, and you see just by changing the Targas we got more cooling too. This is actually really good right here. If you have a ship that is recharging and you're at 62% efficiency on cooling and 100% efficiency on power, as you can see here, our sustained DPS went up when we changed those. If I change these back to the Regulus, we drop down to 495 sustained. And this is when your guns overheat, by the way, guys. In case you didn't know, the total gun DPS that can be sustained without overheating. So, you know, this gives you a little bit more room to work with when shooting your guns and not having to worry about overheating these Omni Skies, okay? So keep that in mind. You can do a little bit of things here. As for bracers, you can look at coolers and different stats. I do have the cooler page set up over here, and you guys can find that in the link below, and I'll put that up for you. But again, these are the cooler stats, and you can change these if you want. It's not really a big deal on the Gladius, but again, it's something you can change, okay? Moving along, this is the Gladius Valiant. This is actually my preferred variant of the Gladius, just because it comes stock with the Omni Skies ready to go. And also, as for missiles, you can do a couple of things with the Gladius and the Gladius Valiant, but this right here, if you have a Gladius Valiant, your ship is ready to go. All you have to do is pull these weapons off of it, pull all the missile racks off of it, right? And what you're going to do is just change that to an Omni Sky, because you're going to respawn a new ship, put the Omni Sky on, you're going to have one remainder, and then you're going to come down here, and what I like to do here is, because we pulled the missile racks off of our old Gladius and we spawned a new one, we're going to have this set up again. We're just going to change the 341s to 313s, because that is going to give you more size 3 missiles, and that is a little bit bigger missile, more alpha per hit, and I like using arresters and vipers just to have a cross section and a heat signature missile. So it kind of messes up the HUD and kind of flusters people trying to pop countermeasures. But again, this is going to make your ship very deadly to other fighters. A couple of hits and one of these missiles is going to take down a fighter if the missile works and lands. Now, of course, missiles are in a pretty bad place right now, but with this missile setup, you are very, very powerful and ready to go, okay? A couple of shots and one of these missiles is enough to take down a fighter. And so, moving along, as for the beacon, pretty good, not really anything to complain about here. It's one of the fastest, so you'll not have any trouble catching people in warp or interdicting people that are trying to get away from you. As far as burst DPS itself, again, you're sitting around 1240, which is one gun less than the Saber. The Saber sits at around 1700, so just know that you're only one gun less here than something like the Saber. This is really good, and having this sustained DPS is also really good as well, guys. This 565 here, a lot of ships can't get this really high above 300. So again, changing the shields and that power supply is going to get this up to around 700, which is actually insane. So you can fire for days with this, okay? Just upgrading the power a little bit. As for speed, you're sitting somewhere in between the Scythe and the Saber. Saber's at like 270, the Scythe is 285, I believe, or something like that. So this is actually one of the faster ships in the game. As for top speed, afterburner speed, you're sitting somewhere in the middle at 1235. which is okay. And of course the yaw and the pitch and the roll limit are very good. Some ships are only 5 higher here, 10 higher here, so you're okay here. This is actually pretty good. In terms of turning fights and things like that, you're very capable of turning with even the best ships and strafing with even some of the best ships. Don't worry about this. In fact, I would say the Gladius is almost a little advantage over some of those ships just because it can strafe so well, and it has a really small cross section, and if you angle and roll your ship right, it can make this ship really hard to hit in a strafing or turn fight. So keep that in mind. Just be wary to show the long section of the ship in a turn fight or a strafing fight. If you angle incorrectly, you're going to give somebody a very long frame section to hit, all right, from the nose down to the afterburners. Okay. As for hit points, 6,051 is pretty mediocre when it comes to most fighters. However, it's sitting on the high side. A lot of the other light fighters, the smaller ones like the Arrow or the Buccaneer, are really light when it comes to HP. They're sitting around 4,000. Right here is the Arrow, and the Buccaneer sits around 3,000 HP. So in terms of HP for its size, it's actually pretty good. Okay, because we're only at 20 meters in length, but we actually have 6,051 HP for armor. So that's actually pretty good for its size when considering how big the ship is compared to something like a Saber or a Hornet, for example, or an Avenger Titan. So this is actually pretty good. The total shields, we're sitting at 3,600. We do have 2 of them, 2 all stops, giving us that. And again, we can change that. But you're always going to be sitting around 3,600. That's okay. Again, this goes a long way to change these just because of the power draw. All right, and that's really all you have to really worry about in terms of the setting up the Gladius. When you get into the ship, go ahead and, of course, overheat your coolers and overheat your power supply. You don't really have to do anything else to it as far as group your guns. Of course, always group your guns to one gun or one button, guys. This will come ungrouped. This will come as 2 groups, one for the nose and one for these 2 guns. So just go ahead and group them all in one. And a couple other things to note about this ship that the Arrow doesn't have and can't do is that I have found that the Gladius can stealth. Okay, now you may have watched some of my other videos on stealth and things like that. Stealth in Star Citizen is kind of akin to suppressors in real life. A lot of people just think stealth is going to make you invisible, like a lot of people think suppressors make you silent, right? That's not the case. Stealth is just suppression of your IR signature, okay? And every ship except for large ships can suppress your IR signature. When I say large ships, I mean large shields like the Starfarer, the Hammerhead, things like that. The Constellation and down can suppress their IR signature. So if you're in Freelancer or Constellation, for example, you can suppress that IR signature, guys, and drop it down, okay? A Connie, for example, will show up around 20 km without suppression on. With suppression on, you're going to show up around 10 km, okay? This ship, the Gladius, has the same suppression signature of a Saber when it's suppressed, of around 1,500 to 1,800 meters, okay? So that's going to make this ship insanely hard to target and hit when you're trying to be engaged by anybody. All right, so I got into a lot of good fights with this ship, and time again after the fights, people were always asking me why they had a hard time locking me or why they couldn't lock missiles, which is also a side effect of this, guys, because when you have suppression on, it also lowers the signature at which somebody can fire missiles. Like right here it says I can fire a missile at 7,500. That's not the case on a suppressed ship. You have to get closer, around 4,000 or 3,500, okay? It's about half. All right, so you got to get real close to fire these missiles. So the Gladius does have that advantage over the Arrow. When you're thinking about what ship to buy, a lot of people compare the Gladius and the Arrow hand in hand. And you see I set this Arrow up just like the Gladius with 2 or 3 Omni Skies, same DPS, guys. And you can come down here and do the same things. We can swap it to a Targa, and we can pop it up to an ACOM Starheart. And while recharging, of course, we can get just about the same efficiency and cooling and power efficiency as the Gladius. So in terms of what they are, They're not too far apart. It's a little bit less HP, but again, you're less size, right? You don't have a lot of size to it. You're 4 meters less in length than the Gladius. As far as speed, you're only 10 less in top speed with strafing. You're the same top speed with afterburners. You have 5 more roll limit and 5 more pitch and then 5 more yaw. So it's really kind of a catch-22. Both have things going for them. The arrow, of course, being smaller, has much quicker acceleration, probably the fastest acceleration of any ship in the game, really. I've not been able to catch an arrow when it accelerates. Okay, guys, that's one of the things about the arrow that's really special, in my opinion, is the acceleration on it. The Gladius cannot match that acceleration, so if you're looking for something that's a fast interceptor type ship, you know, the arrow, hey, yes. Okay, but just note that it has a little bit less HP, a little bit less efficiency when you set it up right, and the arrow is unable to suppress a signature. Now, it can suppress a little bit, but you're not getting it under 5,000. You're still going to be detected always in an arrow around 5,000 meters. I think the normal detection range is around 7,000, so suppression really doesn't do much. It actually just hurts the ship. I wouldn't recommend suppressing an arrow at all if you have one. Don't even try it. I don't know why this is, guys. I don't know if it's a bug or a design feature itself. Don't ask me. I've just, in all my testing, the arrow is the only ship that I've not been able to suppress down as a light fighter to around 1,800 or 1,500 signature, okay? This ship, however, does it fine. Just note that in long engagements, you're going to have power struggles with that suppression feature on. Don't run with it on. If you're into a multi-fight where you're fighting 5 fighters and you're really working your guns or something like that, if you're fighting 1 or 2 guys and you're taking your time and they're letting you spread out your shots a little bit and they're letting you manage your power efficiently, go for it. You can leave it on all day, plus that's going to help you in the fight not get attacked by missiles and other things like that. And again, as I said before, when you do have suppression on, it causes people to have to retarget you at 1,800 meters each time they break within around 3,000. So if you're in an engagement with somebody and they keep getting further away from you, they're going to have to retarget you again at 1,800. They're going to see your green triangle, but they're not going to be able to target it. They're going to be spamming their target buttons, and nothing's going to happen until they get within 1,800 meters of you. Then they're going to get the firing solution reticle, and then they're going to be able to shoot. In a lot of my videos, you'll see people pass me, and they're not shooting. That's because they're trying to figure out what's going on and why they can't target me, okay? So the more you know here, guys, the more it's going to help you in combat. You can really frustrate people with this feature. It's not really known, and that is the suppress IR feature. So again, all ships have it. If your ship doesn't have it, it's just because the screen isn't on it. Switch one of the screens to the heat menu and just hit that suppress IR button at the top. Okay, and now we'll get into some videos showcasing you some fights with the Gladius. Okay, in this first clip, I'm going to be chasing down a Freelancer. I like to use Freelancers as a control time to kill ship in all these fighter videos that I do. I find that it's a very common ship in Star Citizen, especially this month, being that it's the subscriber ship, and overall it's just a nice hauling ship, so people have them. That and one of the first videos made of Star Citizen, I think, featured the Freelancer, so a lot of people bought them. In any case, it's a very common ship, so it's good to know the time to kill on it. This guy, for some reason, is actually going to stop. I don't know why. I assume he's looking at his map, but I'm going to go ahead and take the opportunity to shoot him and test the time to kill on this Freelancer. This is one of the first Freelancers I was able to run into. So I want to notice, and I want to point out, and I want you to notice one thing here is that even when a ship is sitting still, guys, you can still hit different shield panels like I'm doing here. That's going to nullify my first 3 shots. My first 3 shots are pretty much ineffective right here. Only now am I actually shooting the ship in the side that I want. So make sure you're shooting the shield panel that you're aiming at, guys. You only want to hit one shield panel in one side of the ship. Alright, in this fight, I'm chasing down a Gladius Valiant and an Arrow. I see warping to Yella, so I'm going to go ahead and warp in after them. Now, I'm assuming that the Gladius Valiant player is a free-to-play player as well, because they're doing the Australian Day thing where they give out the free Valiant, so I'm not really concerned about the Gladius Valiant, as I see a lot of people flying them that weekend. So I'm going to go ahead and try to engage the Arrow first. He's my primary target for this reason. I'm just assuming that the Gladius Valiant player might be a miner. He could be a trader for all I know, right? Could own a freelancer or something. So I'm just focused on the arrow at this time. Now, fortunately for me, the Gladius Valiant is going to give me a 1v1 with the arrow. I don't know if Potato is going to call his buddy off, or if he just doesn't engage on his own for some reason or whatnot. Maybe they're not together, I don't know. But at the time I didn't know this was going to happen, so I was kind of planning for a 2v1, which is fine. I'll take a 2v1. But he is going to give me a 1v1 with this arrow, so we're going to go ahead and get into an engagement here. And this fight's going to showcase the strengths and weaknesses of both ships, the Gladius and the arrow, okay? This is a good arrow pilot. Now, right away I do see that he is using repeaters, so that's going to give me the confidence to go ahead and get into these slow turn fights with him. I'm not going to maneuver too much. I'm just going to keep rolling my left wing down into him. This is going to cause him to clip me in a near pass. Now, I'm sure that was unintentional. Nobody wants to actually ram each other here. We're just trying to get good passes on each other and get good hits. But again, I do notice that he's using these repeaters, and that's going to give me a little bit more confidence. Now, I do start to black out here, so I'm going to go into a maneuver to prevent that, while still trying to remain unhittable. So I'm going to circle around and then dive down to prevent myself from blacking out. If you start to black out, just go the opposite way. All right, if you're pulling up, pull down. It makes sense, right? So again, I correct myself and I keep myself from blacking out, and now I'm going to go into this turn fight with him. And as you can see, you have to be very, very precise when you're shooting at an arrow. You have to get inside that little circle. A lot of other ships you can shoot around the circle or just outside of it, and you'll still hit a part of the ship depending on where you're aiming and what you're aiming at. The arrow, you pretty much have to be precise, dead on center to get these hits. Now, he is using those repeaters and he's scoring a couple of hits, but he's going to have to hit upwards around 6 or 7 times on the same shield to actually penetrate the shield, so I'm not too worried about his weapons right now. And now you're going to see those target reticles split. That is only unique to small ships, guys. When you have 3 of the same size weapon, or all of the same size weapon on your ship, and they're all the same type weapon, for that matter, and you see a reticle split like that, that has nothing to do with anything but the size of the ship you're fighting versus the angle of your guns. That literally means that depending on which circle I'm aiming at, only 1 or 2 of my guns are going to hit that that ship, okay? So when those reticles break like that, that's to his advantage. All right, and that has to do with him being a very, very, very small ship. So he's making it tough for me to hit here, and I'm just trying to circle around, keep my wings low, keep my wings from able to being hit by him because I don't want them to get knocked off. And also I'm trying to inflict as much damage as possible because I know the arrow has a couple of weak points. Now, I am going to end up shooting off one of his wings here, which I do want to do because that's going to take off one of his guns. And I end up shooting off later on, I believe, his top turret, which is going to bring him down to only 1 gun. So just note that if you're flying the arrow, you do have a couple of weak points, and that top turret is definitely one of them. It can get shot off very easily. So if you present yourself, and I think right there is when I shot it off, if you present that flat surface to somebody and they actually do hit the top of your ship, the chances of your top turret going off on your arrow is really, really good. So just be careful there when you're flying the arrow. Try not to present yourself. And here he's going to whip me into an asteroid, and for some reason I'm not going to explode. I don't know why, guys. In my opinion, I should have just right there. But just Star Citizen things, right? I don't know if that was planned by his part, but if it was, props to him, good show. He should have won that fight right then and there. But we're going to go ahead and keep getting into this turn fight. And again, I think I have him down to 1 gun. So at this point, he's not really wanting to engage. He feels like this fight's over. And he's going to use the arrow's best strength, which is its acceleration, to break away from me. And I cannot catch this. And nobody can, guys. When an arrow wants to leave you in a fight, it leaves you in a fight. So he's just going to break away here, and you see me mashing my afterburner along with him, but his acceleration is so massive that there's just no touching him, and then he's going to warp away to a Celestial on the planet, which I do not see, so he's gone. And I'm going to black out at the same time because I'm trying to catch him, and he dips down like that, which causes me to red out, not black out. But as you can see, he's gone. So that little arrow ends up juking me in the end, even with only 1 leg. ends up just hauling ass away, and there's nothing I can do about it. Now, I could have tried to track him down, but again, I didn't see where he warped off to, and this other guy decided to engage me for some reason. I don't know if this was his buddy or whatnot, but he's going to go ahead and engage me in his Hornet, and compared to something like an arrow and a pilot that knows how to fly that arrow, when this Hornet comes in, he's going to give me a very nice big profile to shoot at, and it's also going to be a very slow turn fight, which is to my advantage, as you can see with these cannons, and I make short work of him.